All righty. Well, welcome to Quixotic Heights, where voices rise, stories inspire, and creativity take center stage. I am your host, Amy M. Lee, and I'm thrilled to welcome a guest whose voice resonates far beyond the opera stage. Shirley Wang is with us today. She's not only an acclaimed opera singer, but also a dynamic speaker. She's a best-selling author, an educator, and she's just amazing. She moves hearts with her music, and we'll have a little sample towards the very end of this show. She empowers minds through her words and uplifts others. I had the pleasure of meeting her in person several times, and I'm always just amazed at how talented this woman is. So, without further ado, please help me welcome Shirley to Quixotic Heights. How are you?
I'm doing well, so happy to be here. It's always such a pleasure to have a conversation with you, whether it's in person or over here.
Thank you so much, Shirley. So, tell us a little bit about your Quixotic dream.
I think as life evolves, that dream changes. And
Mm,
one of the things that really matters to me is I really hope whatever I do makes a difference in somebody or some people's lives, whether it's in a very private way, or maybe sometimes it could be more public, whether it's brief or profound, but maybe takes longer. To me, it just I just would like to make my life count.
yes, absolutely. And it certainly does through your work,
Mhm.
especially with the opera piece. I think that's kind of been a major part of your life. I'm just kind of curious how
Mhm.
you came to realize that your voice was such an amazing instrument.
The funny thing is, every day I wake up, I'm still in doubt. And I think that's the
Mm,
way it works because the instrument is part of your body. It's something you cannot
yeah.
touch or see or even hear when it comes to operatic singing because it's about projection in the room and it changes as the room changes. But when I was in high school, I got really, really, really sick and
Mm,
uh and it was I looking back, I think it's a lot of emotional stress and the little body just couldn't handle it. And when I was on my way to the ambulance, I kind of made a wish. I say, hey, whoever's upstairs, if I come back as a whole piece, I will give you my life, whatever that means. And then 5 minutes later, I said, oh, no, 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 I didn't mean that. I'm sorry. I'm 17. I don't understand what I'm saying. But after I came back from the hospital, I was part of a church youth group. And in the evening when we were all meeting, I just started singing like I always did before I was sick. And all of
mm,
a sudden, the youth pastor stopped. He and his wife were both trained opera singers, and they
mm.
realized something kind of miraculous happened. I don't know if it was a miracle or it was an emotional release because both were open up voices. So they set up free lessons for me to have through the church with a choir director. And then I started having different people offering me free lessons, and I thought, this is scary. So I actually ran away from some people, but then I realized it was something I really loved doing. And maybe there's something to it because people seem to be interested.
Wow. What does training look like for you to prepare your voice
Training.
and get ready?
It's actually it, again it evolves because it's part of the body. And as women, our bodies go through different stages of changes. And some people say every 7 years. When I was young, I was just like open my mouth and wah 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 and I sang, right?
Yeah.
And of course, in opera, we have different languages and the music training. Fortunately, I played the piano since I was 4, so that was
Mm,
helpful. And I love words. And as an immigrant moving to this country when I was a sophomore in high school, I wanted to be a writer, but all of a sudden, I just didn't have the words anymore. So when I discovered opera, not even 2 years later, I was starting at the same point as all
oh,
the other American-born girls because we were singing all different kinds of languages. And we're all dealing with translations, and words always made so much sense to me at a very
mhm.
deep level. So that translated into singing very quickly. So, that was part of the training when I was young. And
Yeah.
then I had the privilege where there were some really incredible world-class masters they took interest in me and they actually did something that I don't know it happened with other people because it seems to be unusual. They'll come to the house and stay for 2, 3 weeks at a time and
Oh,
just teach me. And this is something that people just don't do in today's age. And it's just shocking. And I'm looking back, I'm just feeling like there's something kind of outside our control that shaped that. But now, as I enter into a slightly later stage of a woman's life, and I have to condition myself physically. So my body is healthy. I have the endurance. I need to vocalize pretty much every day because those are muscles. Additionally, I use things like neti pot. So this is what the training actually looks like now, which is physical as well as mental, whereas earlier it was knowledge. So,
amazing. So you actually, you said you came to the United States when you were a sophomore in high school?
hmm
Wow. Okay. So let's unearth that a little bit. What country
Okay.
are you from originally
I
before
was
you came?
born and raised in Taiwan.
Okay. And what brought you to the US?
My family did, and we were in line for immigration, and it was just our turn. And then we go, okay, let's go. Let's see what
Hmm.
happens.
Hmm. Do you remember what it was like during your first year here in the US? And how much English did you know?
I knew probably less than 100 words, and those words including 1 through 100, so maybe
Oh my
200
gosh.
words,
Oh my
maybe
goodness.
200 words. And that includes words like the, uh,
Yeah.
apple, you know. And so I knew very, very, very little English. And it was an interesting experience because I felt like I was living inside of a bubble. Maybe
Hmm.
like the way toddlers felt, like the words halfway made sense, but they didn't quite have feelings. They only had meanings.
Hmm.
And being an expressive person with words, that felt like a special, especially large bubble. And so I didn't feel like I was really living and experiencing, but just more like living and passing days. And
Hmm.
so that's what the first year really felt like.
Yeah. And do you have siblings, Shirley?
Yeah. I have a younger sister and a younger brother.
Okay. And they all came with you to the States?
Mhm.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Gotcha. And how did they do? Trying to
I
navigate the
think
new
my
world.
I think my sister did a little better because she was born at the very last part of August. So my parents decided it's okay for her to repeat a grade because she was always too young for her grade. So I
Hmm.
think she had an easier time integrating because she actually was with girls and boys her own age for the
Yeah.
first time in her life.
Yeah.
And my brother, I think he struggled some because when you get to the elementary school level, there were so many things and activities and teaching that at the time was culturally based. And my parents couldn't help him. Like when Halloween came around, all the other kids brought stuff to school to do the carving of the jack-lantern. And my brother just sat there and watched other people because he didn't know how to come home to tell my parents what he needed. Even if he did, my parents really didn't understand what those things were. So
Yeah.
I think that's kind of like the reality of moving to a new country.
Sure. Okay. And you mentioned that you played piano since you were what, 3 or so? Is that right?
Four,
Or
yeah.
4 years
Mhm.
old? Um, are your is your family musically inclined, or is it mostly you?
I think it's mostly me. It's
Yeah.
mostly me. But my family is very artistic as hobbies. Like my sister plays the flute, my brother plays the cello and the trumpet, and my dad loves music and he loves all kinds of creative arts and he's always reading and he plays classical guitar, but he's only had about maybe a year or two of lessons when I was a child. And but he just kept on because he loves it. And so I think he introduced me to classical music when I was really little. My uncle, his older brother, had a huge collection of LPs and for classical music. And I think those kind of things really kind of made me feel those things were just normal. They weren't
Mm-hmm.
strange.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Do you play any other instruments besides the piano?
Not really. I
No.
took a little bit of violin, but then, piano took a lot of time. So eventually I decided to pick and choose. And I also did a lot of artwork, which also took time.
Oh, you're an artist too then. I love that.
Well, I don't know if I'll call myself an artist, but I do enjoy it. And
Yes.
it's relaxing.
Okay. I love it. A woman of many talents. Um, with the opera piece, I know it's a pretty demanding art form, and you and I had this discussion in Vegas actually about it. What do you think are some of the misunderstandings about opera? Because I can tell you, like, I didn't realize how much training and practice, and especially learning different languages too, because opera is not always in English, right? It's
Most of the time, they're not.
yeah, yeah. So tell us how demanding it is, and what are some of the misconceptions?
I think sometimes people think opera performances are very mannered. And because it's very mannered to a certain degree and it's in a foreign language, people sometimes think it's kind of like the way I felt the first year in this country. Feels like there's a distance.
Mm,
And things stopped having real feelings and meanings. They feel detached, like they don't relate to us as human beings. So and but I think this is something I strive to try to make a difference for. So in my concerts, in my personal concerts, I enjoy giving intimate as well as large audience concerts. I talk about the pieces to help people to relate, to understand, the phrase, a person burst into a song. Why do
yeah.
you burst into a song? Is because you feel something.
Mm,
And so I think a lot of times people don't connect with opera because they don't understand it. And also people don't like to feel like they don't know something.
mhm,
So I think that's a misconception because operas are like really the word, I think the term soap opera really is
mhm,
referring to the kind of stories operas feature. I went to see Rigoletto last weekend, which is about a woman who was deceived and kind of really catfished. And he met this young guy. They smile at each other, look at each other at church. They never met. Finally, he came over, introduced himself, and told her what his name was and that he was a poor student. Of course, before they officially met, she was like, "Oh, I think he's a student. And I really, really, really wish he's poor because that his
yeah.
heart would be pure." And of
Oh,
course, he is actually a duke. And
oh,
he is a player.
mm,
And so, but he knew girls her age were like that.
mm,
So he had his whole quote unquote profile set up, right? He goes to
yeah.
church with wearing regular clothes and highlights his good looks, just like those picture with filters we have on the internet. And he
Guilty.
made sure his friends, yeah, stay away, so they
Yeah,
don't see that I associate with you guys. Obviously,
yeah.
he's wearing clothes that look like a poor student. And then, of course, he successfully gets the attention of the girl that he thinks is the hottest at a church, at a
Mhm,
small local church. And then he catfishes this woman. And of course, then she goes through this really horrible experience of what felt like it was going to be a special moment turning into a one night stand. Her father came to grab her, and she's wearing her clothes was like not even right anymore. And then he picked her up and tried to hide her. But she's like, "But I love him. I think he really must care about me. I don't understand it." And
mm,
then she catches him with another older woman who's experienced and all that stuff. And her father wanted somebody to kill this boy because it was like a West Side Story moment, right? And then
mm,
she's like, if a woman who's loose could care for him, I should sacrifice for him. So she goes in, pretends to be the person who should be killed, and she died for him. And
mm,
her father gets this body in the sack, say, "Well, I'm going to be the person who throws this body in the river." And then stabs the bag a few more times. And then finally realizes that's actually his daughter who's now
Oh,
beyond the point of being saved. And so,
mm-hmm.
so those stories are maybe exaggerated, but if it's not exaggerated, then it's not a good story.
Mm-hmm.
But we can relate to it.
Yeah.
So a lot of times I think people feel it's in a different language, it's hard to understand, but I think human emotions are universal.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
once you have a tool to understand what it is, and you hear how it's personified through the music, which is
Yeah.
really grand because you got this huge orchestra and singing in a very specific way where it fills a 4,000 seat auditorium without amplification. And what drives all the sound is your breath. And your breath is connected to your feelings, your emotions. It's
Mm-hmm.
actually a very powerful and relatable experience, but it's also kind of scary because people don't understand what it is. And people
Yeah.
feel kind of silly if they feel like they don't know what's going on.
Yeah. I know that's me personally. Like I don't think I've ever been to an opera show or performance before. And that is part of it. Like I don't understand it,
Mhm,
Italian or Latin or whatever language you're singing in. And so I'm afraid that I won't fully experience, right, that performance. But
mhm.
then you also see people who are just moved to tears, even though they may not understand the whole thing. Um, so yes, I would love to experience it. And especially when you are performing, I would love to see you. I know you've recently performed Madame Butterfly, is that correct?
Mhm.
Can you tell
Yes.
me a little bit about that piece and how you prepared for that?
That piece is a bit of a sensitive piece nowadays because it's an Italian man who's trying to write about a Japanese woman doing a very sensitive time of history. And so, to be 100% honest, I had a hard time initially because there was a piece of me that felt resistant to her
Mhm.
story.
Mhm.
And but I have to become her. Because the first reaction was like, how can you be that stupid? How can you fall in love with such an asshole? Sorry
Mhm.
about the language, but hey,
That's fine.
and and I mean the same story goes for Gilda or the from Rigoletto, right? And I realize it's a cross race. It's a woman problem. It's an oxytocin issue. And it's not necessarily always racial, but it's especially sensitive when there's a historically, racially kind of difficult topic that's associated with Madame Butterfly. For those of you who may not be familiar, but I think many of you are, she was a Japanese geisha who was only 15 years old. And the marriage broker brokered a marriage
Mhm.
between her and her husband, Pinkerton, and who is a member of the US Navy. And at the time, it was a practice they encouraged those young men who was really they were having a really hard time overseas to have relationships to form their pseudo temporary families when they're stationed in Japan, in Asia, and places like that. And so Butterfly didn't understand it was not real.
Mhm.
And Pinkerton, um, I had to really think about it because it's so easy to dislike him, but I have to be in love with him and I have to believe and have conviction. And then the more I thought about it, the more I realized um, Pinkerton, as a young American boy, was probably drafted just fresh out of high school. And he's never been serious about any girls he dated because they were all teenagers. And some people get very angry about this adult white man dating this underage Asian girl. But when I really thought about it, before he was shipped off, the girls he dated were about that age.
Mhm. Mhm.
And we forget that because we think of him as this adult man who was this American soldier. But he was just a boy. And he probably dated girls. Maybe he had a high school sweetheart. They got together in freshman or sophomore. At the time, they were probably both 14 or 15. And then they broke off, maybe in high school somewhere, and then he got shipped off. So he didn't even think about marriage. He didn't think this was serious. he had a very American dating mentality that was interpreted by Italian person on top of that. So there was a lot of complications about how Europeans view Americans, how Europeans interpreted what an Asian woman's role is and
Mhm.
our sensibility. So that was the first part I had to get past as a person, as a woman, and as an Asian woman, right?
Mhm.
And because
Mhm.
there's already that issue that already exists in this country and also in the world. So once I got past that, that's when I really start to relate to the music and the text and the story, and having to go back to my much younger days where I didn't really understand love could go wrong.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
you have to
We're more
believe
naive,
that way.
right? Hmm.
Hmm.
Wow, that's really powerful. There's so many layers to the
Hmm.
story, to all of the stories, really, and
Hmm.
so
Right.
it's amazing, the headspace, the mindset that you have to put yourself into as you prepare for these
Mm.
roles. And you're a soprano, is that right?
I'm a soprano.
Soprano. Okay. And you mentioned something to me earlier at one point about how difficult it is to sing soprano. Can you share a little bit more, at least for the Madame Butterfly, because it's mostly written for sopranos, right?
Yeah, it is written for soprano, and it's of course, now we're getting to a little bit more technical portion where there are many different kinds of soprano. There are people who sing a lot of fast, high passages. There are sopranos whose voice lies higher, like mine does, but it's lower than those super high ones. And
Mm,
our voices need to be of a certain size because the orchestra is huge for this
mm,
particular type of writing. Versus let's say there are other operas, the orchestra may be half the size or one third of the size. Or maybe they don't use the brass instruments, they only have strings, and the strings don't have as much volume as, let's say, 4 or 5 French horns in the section, right? So Madama Butterfly is challenging not only because it has many challenging spots, but because it's the second longest role in the soprano literature. And which means if I have a role that's about this long and there are this many hard parts, you just work through it. But now I have a marathon of a role that's about this long. And
mm.
now I keep having those hard parts. So I have to really pace myself vocally. I also had to, throughout the entire year of preparation, to keep working every day to build endurance so I can get through. Getting through in itself was hard.
Wow. So what happens when you prepare yourself for these roles and then it's showtime, the curtains open, but vocally maybe you're not feeling well. Usually what happens when that is the situation? You have
I remember there is a little short, people made it into a short from a part of an interview with Pavarotti. So he talks about when you get up in the morning, you vocalize just a little bit, just to make sure the voice is there. And sometimes it's not in the best shape. Then I do things like neti pot, drink a lot of warm fluid, and get the body comfy, get myself kind of mentally to be in a space where you kind of have to feel kind of invincible but intelligent at the same time. Then you warm up again later. And this time you have to insist. You have to work your voice out. And then later on, you check your voice again. But you don't push too hard. By this time, because you insisted to work things out, earlier in the day, let's say maybe start off at 9, 10 o'clock, you check your voice. Around lunch, you work through your voice. And around 3, 4 o'clock, this time you check your voice. Most of the time, now it's getting to be there. So
Hmm.
you warm up some to keep the voice there, and then you go to the theater, you warm up again, and then you do things to keep the vocal cords vibrating, like uh, they're very soft, but they keep the vocal cords vibrating. So that's kind of how I work through the day. And I check where my voice starts with. Some days it's great, other days it's not happy. And the days before, I have to be careful, try not to eat at places that I don't know and try not to eat things I don't know just in case of allergy reactions. And sometimes I wear a mask. So smog and smoke and whatever that's, or, allergic things I may be having in the air doesn't get in. And I start drinking a lot of water. I use neti pot twice a day and take bath, so there's a lot of steam. So, the voice doesn't always start off where it needs to be, but you have to work through it.
Has there ever been a situation where you're on stage and in your opinion you failed at something? If so, could you share a story where you failed and how'd you get through that?
I think I feel that way every single performance at some point. I like to be perfect, but something always happens where it's different than I expected. Sometimes it's different because it's just better.
Mm.
Sometimes it's different because something ingenious happened interpretation wise, because I'm in the moment. And usually in the same concert, something else happens that's in the opposite direction too, because I took
Mhm.
one too many risk because I got a little happy, you know. And it's like, hey, it's going really well. Let's try this.
Yeah.
Oh, probably shouldn't have, And then you have to be in the mental habit of moving on, because the moment you think back, so the voice is powered by the breath. So the voice is like a little boat. I think of this like a little paper boat, like a little origami boat, and you put in the little stream of water. And if you start thinking back at what just happened, what do? You stop the air, you stop the stream, and what happens to the boat? Stops. So the voice stops. So it's a constant mental training of moving on.
Yeah.
You can't go back and think about it, and then you go home and cry for the next 3 days, and then you remember, oh yeah, I have to move on. I have to vocalize now. Staying busy helps.
Yeah. Do you think the audience knows when you quote unquote messed up on something, or they just don't know, or they're just so moved that they forgive it?
I tell you a funny story. So once I was in an opera, and my costume involved a skirt, and the skirt started falling off when I was singing in the middle of a really big duet. And I was fighting with my husband on stage, right? And then the skirt just started falling off. And so I was like trying to work into the staging, like, oh, I'm doing this with my hands, like I'm fighting. And really, I'm just holding up my skirt and struggling, and struggling, thinking, oh my God, when do I get off stage? And then there was a critic in the audience who came to both shows, the opening and also
Mhm.
that performance. And he wrote, I don't know what happened to the soprano, but this time she really came alive. It
Oh,
was like I was mesmerized the whole time. I couldn't take my eyes off her, especially during the scene when she was fighting with her husband.
mm.
He knew something, but he didn't know anything. You know what I mean?
And the whole time you're trying to keep your skirt up.
And
That,
I thought I sang like just horribly. Just I thought I was singing horribly because I couldn't focus. I couldn't concentrate. My focus was on let's not make this into a different kind of show. It's above my pay scale, you
yeah,
know.
yeah. The
So
vibe
I
you're
felt
thinking.
like vocally I was just messing up and just, but then he seemed to have thought differently. So you never
Yeah,
know.
you came alive in his opinion. Were there any moments that you were so moved by your own performance that it nearly broke you, or that, I don't know, do you, because you do it over and over again, does it feel like a chore, or do you have those moments where like, oh my God, I'm pretty damn amazing?
I would tell you a secret. Every time before I go on stage, I'm like, oh my God, what a chore. Every time when I prepare, like the week before I have to go on, it feels like a chore. But the moment I'm on stage, everything changes.
Hmm.
But I never really feel, oh, I'm so amazing. Because I think here's the thing, distraction. And I think this is a very interesting lesson for me as a person, not just as a singer. But because I have to live it, So it becomes so much more real for me.
Mhm.
Distraction doesn't always take forms in the way you think it does. When I'm distracted on stage, 99% of the time, I'm thinking about singing,
Hmm.
except I'm not thinking about what I need to be thinking. I'm still thinking about singing, so it's very deceptive.
Hmm.
It feels like focus, but it's distraction. Whether I'm thinking about what just happened, whether I'm thinking about, oh my God, what if I cannot make this note? Let me do this extra thing. Or, oh my God, that was so good. And then immediately the note afterwards falters. Because guess what? I'm not focused on what I need to be doing. So I learned distractions can be something that looks like it's the right thing to do. And I think that applies to life. We get distracted because things look like it should help, but it's really a distraction, but it looks like it's not, but it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Okay, for our listeners who don't know much, me included, about opera, can you give us any historical context in terms of the history of opera and why it's still so important in our society today?
I think it has a lot to do with history and also humanity.
Mhm.
So, whenever we have any type of performing art forms, especially to do with theater and voice, I think it's people's need to live out a fantasy and also to express.
Mhm.
And I don't think the early part of the opera, uh, it's interesting. It was even from the very early time during Mozart's lifetime, it was very divided. You have the opera that was performed in court, like the Shakespearean plays. Some of them were performed in court. You also have the People's Theater.
Mm.
And if you watch the movie Amadeus, you see that Mozart was falling out of favor because he wanted to write operas that was about truth, about reality, about things he didn't like politically, socially, economically. He wanted to comment on it. So he fell out of favor from somebody who was set up to, write for the court, for the grand opera houses. To then he was writing for his friend because it was so important for him to make music. Like the opera Magic Flute was really giving away a lot of social context between the royalty, the Freemasons, and the regular people. And then he wrote operas about the maids and the servants outsmart their masters. And he wrote a lot about women being smarter than men
Yeah.
and how men were distrusting of women. And how the servant class was wiser than the very naive and overprotected nobilities. So even from the very beginning, I think it was satisfying certain human needs for either you were rich and well off and powerful, then you're
Mhm.
watching those shows that kind of satisfies your vanity and also helps you to stay connected with your people or your people who were poor who paid two little coins to go see an opera that was written in a way you can understand in your own language because initially opera was written in Italian. And then during that time, they started writing operas in their own languages, which started to be German, and then also French, and then
Mhm.
later English, and now there are even operas written in Chinese and in Thai and then those other languages. And so I also think it relates a lot to traditional local theaters in all different cultures, like the Chinese traditional operas. There are many different genres within it. And so there's a lot of storytelling. And I think the reason why it's still important is for me, AI is such a huge thing now, and AI is our friend, but we have to know it so we know what can and will be replaced and what can or cannot be replaced. And within the music industry, anything that's altered and filtered through electronically can be learned and reproduced by machines,
Mhm.
AI, aka machine learning, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it also can create things that's out of human limits, which is incredible, which also allows a lot of people with smaller budgets to be able to produce really incredible things. And like, there is an AI singer that's actually really famous in China. And
Mm,
it started off because the composers, the songwriters couldn't afford to hire singers to record demos for them. So now
mm,
they have this AI singer who does this incredible job and can sing outside of what normal people could do. But then you have opera, and none of it is amplified. And there's this exchange energetically. As human beings, we have electromagnetic fields, and that's how EKG is done, because the electricity from our hearts could be detected feet
mm,
away. And I have a suspicion, and maybe this will be fun to have a scientific study on. When an opera singer is performing on stage in a large theater, the fact that our voice travels to the very back end of the last row of the balcony on the top um, requires us to think really big. We have to be expanding. And there's something that's so wholly human and completely divine at the same time, because it
mm,
feels like a miracle. And you have to trust if you're pushing your voice. This is how the science works. That's kind of interesting. In order for the voice to travel and get bigger as it goes further, you have to resonate, but you cannot push. But
mm,
in order to resonate, it will require a lot of air. So your body is working really hard, but your throat is completely relaxed. And you're not screaming, yelling, or pushing out. You're existing, you're being. And your
mm,
breath is connected not just with your body, but how you feel as a human being. You
mm,
have to tap into those very intense, very tender, very specific and complicated feelings. And then you have to allow it to expand and fill up the entire space. And of course, when you fill up the space, it also begins to have chemical reactions with the people who are sitting in the audience. I went to see The Hours, a new opera that's in English at the
mm,
Metropolitan Opera. This was the novel that was adapted to be the movie, and then now it's an opera.
mm.
This was also the first season the Metropolitan Opera reopened since the pandemic, because they had to shut up. They have to shut down all the theaters, especially this kind of theater, because it's a super bread spreading type of environment.
Yeah.
I was sitting in the audience seat, and a moment of extreme emotional intensity happened on stage. The air surrounding me started to become thick and frozen, and you could feel it.
Mm,
And you can feel the pin drop, and then you can hear the sniffling. And I was feeling this collective feeling with the live audience who were
mm,
sitting around me while we're feeding this energy back to the performer on stage. And there is no mechanical, electronic machinery, except maybe the air conditioning, right? And that really um, stands between the production of the sound, the communication of the performers, and the emotional responses of the audience. And I think that's really important because, as we advance with technology, which I personally celebrate, I think we have to make especially a special, extra effort to live as humans at the same time, to reconnect with the humanity. And
absolutely.
this is slow music. I'm not talking about the speed, I'm talking about the process.
Mhm.
The music travels from the human body or live instruments in the orchestra through the air, not through a blaring sound system. that
Hmm.
comes from behind you, around
Right.
you. When
Yeah.
it's coming from a single sound source, it requires time to travel all the way back to the end of the auditorium. Like when I'm on stage, what I hear coming back from the auditorium could have as much of a 3 to 5 second delay. So
Mm-hmm.
this is slow music. And for the audience members, what you experience at home when, or if you go to a movie theater to watch the HD, delivery, which is so great, and it
Yeah.
helps people to understand and become educated and experience it, but it's never going to be the same as when you're in the audience because
Yeah.
now we have electronic filtering. And the voice changes when you're in a different theater. My voice sounds like a different voice because it incorporates with the physical space. And when people start sitting down, the acoustic changes again because human carbon bodies changes the acoustics. So that's what I think of why it's still really important and may hopefully as time goes on actually become more important as one of the ways to maintain human experience in existence.
That's so powerful. And every show is going to be so different because you have different
Mhm.
dynamics, right? Different elements. And you're right, AI
Right,
is not there, it's not present, so it's not consistent throughout. So you literally are doing it, having a different experience each time. Um,
right. Even
yeah,
as performer, you know, you
yeah,
sitting there is different than somebody else sitting there in the audience for me. Even if I
yeah,
don't know you,
yeah,
something is different. Your presence, you matter. And I think
yeah.
that's important.
That's so amazing. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about your books. I think you have a series, is that right? It's called The Power of Why.
Yes, musicians.
Yeah.
And I work with a wonderful woman. Her name is Glory Saint Germain. And her personal story is incredible. And then she reached a point in her life, legacy was very important.
Mm.
And so she started to put together a series of books. And then she decided if this was truly going to be a legacy, it shouldn't be just about her. And it shouldn't be about her. It should be about the people who read it. So
Mm.
she invited different musicians, and every volume had a different focus. And so the first one I wrote about was actually as a performer, and it was about the imposter syndrome.
Mm. Yes.
Yes. And so then later on, I had a volume where I wrote as an educator, and I talked about the compassion and the need to understand where the students come from. Because when I moved to this country, overnight, my name changed from Xiaoling to Shirley because my
Mm.
parents wanted me to have an easy time navigating through this society, and a name is helpful. So,
Hmm.
so understanding where the students coming from and relating to music and how this is a particular type of learning that allows a student who's practically overnight becoming a nonverbal person to still
Mm.
express their thoughts and their abilities and be respected for their minds, even if they couldn't express verbally. So those were the things. I think I share three different stories, and in each volume, I shared a different story relating to myself as a musician, as an educator, as a performer. And a big part also ties into my immigrant story because I think if I
Yeah.
didn't immigrate to this country, I wouldn't have gone into music.
Yeah. Is there going to be more volumes, or do you think three is kind of where she's going to stay at?
She did five, but the
Okay.
other two, I felt the focus I didn't feel like I had anything to contribute towards, and we're done with that per se. And I was very honored to be part of it. And it was a very interesting process. It was kind of like my childhood's dream come true because I wanted to be a writer. But then for
Mm.
years, I felt inadequate because you have to read a lot to be a good writer.
Yes.
I always I read so much when I was growing up in Chinese. I just felt like I was never going to catch up to the amount of reading I did when I was growing up. So this was very meaningful for me.
Mm, I love that. So you were, well, in the space of education and in the space of speaking, because you do speaking engagements as well. Can you share a little bit about how you put together your program for teaching and for speaking?
I'll start with the speaking. The speaking is I'm taking on a very interesting format, which is called keynote concerts. So those are keynote speaking engagements, and you have a message and you share the stories like regular keynote speeches are, but I will weave into three songs that
Mm,
helps to tell the story. Because I think, like what I shared earlier, what we want to have is an emotional experience.
yes.
And we carry the lessons further and remember them more. And my first experience doing that, I didn't realize was initially it was in my concerts, but during the pandemic, and there was this anti-Asian hate movement. So I was invited to speak, and they knew I was a singer, so they asked if I could also share my music. And this was at the time over Zoom. So that was the first time I did it. And it coincided with Mother's Day, so I sang a song in Chinese that was um, about how a mother's love matters to the child.
Mm,
So it was very interesting because then, when they brought back the audience members on the screen with all the little tiny headshots of
yeah.
people, I see a lot of people they were wiping away tears, and then I realized it was the music part that brought everything home. So that's what I do with it with a speaking engagement is whenever they will allow me, I bring on the keynote concert style. So
Mm,
sharing the message with both speaking and also the music. And for
yeah.
education, um, you know, a music teacher has the opportunity to make a real impact in a person's life because we are not like regular school teachers. We tend to
Mhm.
have a closer personal relationship with the students. So this is an opportunity to teach with compassion and showing the students it's meaningful to be met where they are
Mhm.
and it's valid. Their feelings, their progress, their pace, how they process, all of it is valid. And that's my approach for education. And I remember there was a kid, he came to me when he was in high school. He took like a semester group piano class in school. He thought he liked music. I think he was this is probably the summer of his sophomore before he was a rising sophomore. It was after freshman, after he took piano in school. And then in 2.5 years, he advanced to the second to the highest level possible in the testing system, and which is which is actually practically college level as a piano major. But he suffered with ADHD and mild dyslexia.
Mm,
So during the process, I encouraged him to discover how his brain works. We did a lot of experimental things, and I never stopped him when he was progressing really fast. But I said, you're going to run into walls because when you do this, we're going to miss things. But I just want to prepare you so you know when that happens, then we with each other have to have an agreement. We're going to slow down and we're going to fill in the holes. And when the holes fill, you can take off again. So we went through many parts of that process, and he became much more patient because he was emotionally and mentally prepared for those spots. And then he trusted me because we were able to overcome them. And then there was also the issue with attention and focus. And whenever he was during the vacation time, he wasn't on his medication. So we will work with certain special methods that trigger his frontal lobe and helps him to focus. So great, he accomplished things on piano that people think he couldn't. Most people with normal situations for learning couldn't because he did like about 10 years of piano progress in 2 years.
wow.
And there was a adjudicator from Juilliard who adjudicated him for his last adjudication and wrote, I hope you will consider a career in piano performance.
Mm,
He was like, really? So it brought him
mm,
so much confidence, but he was failing high school. During one of his lessons, he came to me, he said, Miss Shirley, I'm not going to graduate with my friends. And they told me today I can't walk with my friends during graduation because I can't finish my chemistry class. I say, oh, what happened? He said, I just really kind of dreaded taking that class. So I waited
Mhm.
until the last minute. I'm taking a seventh period. I'm doing it online. And I just never did any work. And now there are only 6 weeks left. And they told me there's no way I could make up 2 semesters, an entire year's worth of chemistry. And so I just go, you know how sometimes in life there's nothing to lose? Like, well, for now, you're just gonna fail. So you have nothing to lose. But in your piano, you did 10 years worth of work in 2 years. It may not happen for chemistry because it's much harder in some ways, or maybe not as hard. We don't know because we've never compared them side by side in your learning experience. But we learn things about hyper focusing for your brain. We learned about a lot of things in how your brain works. What if, as an experiment, and I don't recommend this for the long term because you probably have to stay up a lot and stuff like that. It's not good for your health. Eventually, you're going to be as old as me and you can't do that anymore. But give it a try. 4 weeks later, his mother called me and says, this kid asked me if it's okay to invite you to attend his graduation. There were only 6 tickets for the family. And they wanted me to be one of them because he just passed his chemistry.
Oh my gosh.
Not only he passed, he got an A.
Oh my
And
goodness.
he's graduating, he's walking with his friends. That's why he has 6 tickets. And his mother said they want to know if I would go. I said, of course I would. I said, I would clear my schedule. I'm going to be there for him. And he drove over with his brand new driver's license and he dropped off his ticket. He was so excited. And now he is a professional. He works in IT. He has a college degree and he still plays music and he writes his own music. So I think as an educator, I have the luxury in the way I teach to meet the students where they are. So that's what I believe in. And you never know. You don't know where the children or adult, where their limitations or potentials may be. And I know as little as they do, right? And
Yeah.
so it's really a partnership and meeting them where they are.
That's so amazing and so beautiful. And what a way to wrap up our podcast with that story, because this is what we're all about. We're all about the quixotic dreams, and yes, there'll be
Right.
challenges along the way, but we can achieve these impossibles. Um,
Mhm.
Before we wrap up, Shirley, are there anything that you want to talk about that we didn't cover yet?
You are amazing. You ask all the amazing questions, and thank you for giving me the time to share. I'm good. And there will always be more stories, but we don't have to tell everything at once.
Yes, we can always invite you back. Okay, well, where can people find you, honey, to follow you and learn more? And hopefully there's a calendar, a schedule of some sort that maybe we can show up and see you perform live.
So I'm on Instagram, Miss MS dot Shirley
Mhm.
dot Wang. And I know lots of people now do Instagram. And I'm also on Facebook. You can look for me, Shirley Xiao-Ling Wang. And Xiao-Ling spells as Xiaoling. And I think I'm the only one with the first and the middle and the last name. So you're welcome to follow me on both platforms. I post about my performances and share some of the back, stories with people. So that would be a great way to follow.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Shirley. You've been amazing. I really appreciate you. I can listen to you not only all day because of your beautiful voice and your accent, but the stories that you tell and the knowledge, the depth of knowledge that you have in your experience. Um, it's just so profound. So thank you for treating us to that. Your journey really reminds us that our voice, when used with purpose, can become our most transformative instrument. And so, with that, thank you so much, listeners. Do yourself a favor, follow Shirley, try to see her perform in live if you can. And if you love today's episode, please subscribe. Please give us a rating. and share it with all of your loves. And we appreciate you so much. Thank you so much, Shirley. Again, it's such a joy. I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you. It's an honor to be with you today. Thank you.
And now a special performance by Shirley Wang. It's titled Je tua madre from Madame Butterfly by Giacomo Puccini. And in this deeply emotional aria from Act 2, Cho-Cho-san, a 15-year-old Japanese girl married to an American who intends to leave her once he finds a proper American wife, prepares her young son for a heartbreaking future. Sensing the coming loss, Cho-Cho-san speaks tenderly to him, imagining the day he is taken from her by his American father. Puccini weaves a lullaby-like melody through a mother's farewell, one filled with dignity, sorrow, and selfless love. The aria is one of the opera's most poignant expressions of maternal devotion and tragic inevitability. Without further ado, Shirley Wang. Enjoy.
Sai cos'ebbe cuore di pensare quel Signore? Che tua madre dovrà prenderti in braccio e dalla pioggia e al vento andare per la città. E dalle pedose decente la tremante stenderà. E butterfly, orribile destino, danzerà per te. E come fece già la ghisa Ah no, no, questo mai, questo mister che al tesonore poi